Hello, and welcome to Pivotal Moments, a podcast sharing, exploring, and celebrating stories of change, big or small. We are all agents of change and have the power to pivot at any point, at any time. I'm your host, Siria Gutierrez, along with my co-host, Melissa Robina. On this episode, we discuss surviving the holidays, holiday stressors, and share our personal tips on how to get through family gatherings in one piece.
Surviving the holidays.
Yes.
Now, why do you feel that this topic is so important to discuss?
Because I think for certain aspects of the holidays, they're a lot of fun. And even with the weird shit we've got going on this year, I think a lot of people are still going to spend time with families. And families can either be a source of joy or they can be a source of pain, or they're both.
For me, I think why this topic is so important to discuss, because I think when you grew up in a traumatic household, I know we have this idea, Dan Hallmark Channel, of, it's going to be snowing on Christmas Day and everybody is just gathering around a beautiful table all decorated and everybody's chatting about all the wonderful things that they've done in the year. But I found that that's not how my holidays typically go down. And I find that as the holidays start to approach, I actually get a little trepidatious, a little anxious, and I start to almost dread the holidays. And it's not because I don't love my family, I do. It's just all the crap that gets kind of compounded that goes along with it.
Right, that dread of I don't necessarily want to be here, or I'd much rather be spending holidays with friends or doing other things like that. I think that that's definitely something that has come out. So like for us in our house, we split the holidays. We go to Denver for Thanksgiving and we stay in Las Vegas for Christmas. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of how it's worked out over the years, which, let me tell you, I've gotten some shit over that too. But it's actually made it very nice, because then the holidays start off really nice. Then it'll be filled with events and other things that go on. I don't know how it's going to be this year, but the squad may still get together, those kinds of things. And then it all leads up to Christmas Eve, where due to tradition, I have to go spend that time with my parents.
Something you just brought up kind of made me think, okay, so I am a child of divorce. So not only do I have the anxiety surrounding one, family gathering, but actually two. And how do I manage the time fairly? Because then, I'll get shit if I don't spend enough perceived time with one family member. So how do you balance your time evenly? And so it's interesting, because sometimes God, I'm like, what an asshole I am, because, I'm feeling this dread of hanging out with the families over the holiday. But actually the American Psychological Association actually did a study, and 38% of people actually say that their stress increases during the holidays because of various things, including family.
I could see that completely, because you're dealing with different dynamics, and part of it is that even if, we're going to talk about family roles as a whole nother episode, but right now you end up stepping back into some of your childhood-like tendencies. You revert back. And so you're not really that person, but in that moment you're like, why am I feeling like this other person? Why am I feeling like this child? Because you're at your parents' house.
Yeah, and so there's a slew of reasons why the holidays are stressful. You have financial. I remember being a college student, and you have not even 2 pennies to rub together, and yet there was this expectation that, God, I need to be able to purchase something to show family members that I care. And so I remember, I've never really been in debt, but I would, my credit card would almost be maxed out just on Christmas gifts. And then what do you typically do with Christmas gifts? You maybe use them, or they're for a month and then they're gone. But you mentioned family roles, which again was something else that emerged for me, which again we'll talk about in the next episode, because that's entangled. The biggest thing for me is expectation.
Expectations is huge. You took the words right out of my mouth. Expectations are what make the holiday either really good or really bad. But I think that expectations just load everything.
They load everything, and then when something happens that makes the event go below your expectations, what happens? You're disappointed. or, it doesn't even have to be your own expectations. For example, my mother, she wants the whole family to be together and us to basically like sing Kumbaya, decorate the Christmas tree together as we're, watching a Christmas carol play in the background. And when it doesn't happen that way, I mean, I know she's disappointed, but she, will get upset and angry, and then maybe, then it becomes like those like passive aggressive remarks, and then it just starts to bring the entire mood down for everyone there. And I'm just giving one example.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's not the only one that's guilty of this. We all do this, and it's just basically because our expectations weren't met.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, looking at what our expectations are, being realistic about our expectations, because you can't change people.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to change from 1 year to the next. They might.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we go in with these expectations of like, things are going to be better this year. My dad and I are going to get along. Things are going to be different, and they typically aren't. And so,
Mm-hmm.
how do you deal with expectations?
You know what? I've let go of them
Mm.
as much as I can let go of them, especially when it involves going to spend time with my parents. I just let go of expectations. I've let it go in other areas of my life as well, and I think it's actually served me much better, because then I don't necessarily have that regret or that disappointment that may come with whatever expectations I put on something. I may have my own expectations of myself,
Mm-hmm.
but those are generally less outward, and they're going to deal more with how I want to act and how I want to be in that moment. So finding that I don't put expectations on how that evening's going to go, because a lot of times my mind would just go to the negative stuff of I'm expecting there to be a fight. I'm expecting there to be drama of some kind. And right now, dear listeners, I'm wearing a Shakespeare shirt that says "Spare me the drama."
Apropos.
Yeah, basically.
No, and yeah, so expectations is probably my number one holiday mood killer.
What is the biggest expectation you see on yourself?
Of myself?
Or that you see yourself as you're entering the holidays?
That everybody's going to get along. And that's not true, because another thing that stresses me out, which was also kind of like on my list, is that I don't necessarily get along with all members of my family, whether it's, differing views or beliefs. I have some in-laws that hold very different political views than I do, which is fine, but it's like voiced. I'm like, do we really need to, share your political thoughts over Christmas dinner? Probably not. It's probably not the time and the place, but it stirs emotion. It stirs the pot. And again, it just like creates like this like unhealthy environment, and it's in, just no one gets along after that.
Well, is it being provocative for provocative sake, or is it just they want to talk about politics because they know that you're, one of those crazy liberals?
But the thing is, I don't even bring up my political views, because I just don't think it's the time and the place. But I think, for whatever reason, they feel the need to voice it. Maybe it's because they don't feel heard
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, but, I just, when you're sitting around, the dinner table for Thanksgiving or for Christmas, and you're bringing up these, like, what I think are really radical views, it stirs the pot into a discussion when really it should be about something else. And I think when you ask me what my expectations are, it's more of just like,
well, what should it be about?
Well, family. And I think it should be about, looking for joy, because our lives are so busy, and I really do value family, and I really do love my nibblings. So it's like, how can I maximize my joy with them? Whether it's, baking with them, building, gingerbread houses with them. I want to make memories, and that's the expectations that I guess I come into it with. But like I mentioned in a previous episode, where
sounds more like a hope, though.
It is, but I mean, again, that's like, what are your expectations? They're hopes for the future, right? My expectation is, or my hope is, that holidays will go off without a hitch. But there always seems to be something that fucks it up. There's always something that happens. Someone says something, they do something, and then we'll talk again about family roles and dynamics in the next episode, but it just like, it permeates, and it just sends a ripple effect that I feel like ruins the mood and the environment for the entire holiday.
Mm-hmm. Well, if it isn't the holidays, when you're around family, that you can discuss some of these things like politics, religion, other sensitive topics that you're not supposed to, for whatever reason, talk to your people about. When do you talk about these things?
I guess, you never really do, but or at least I don't. But again, like I don't even necessarily interact with these people on social media. So I guess there really isn't a time. But then again, coming back to it, it's like, well, why do you have to have that discussion with me? So there's just no reason for that. So yeah, it just makes it for a very interesting dynamic at the holiday gatherings. But in addition to that, another thing that really stresses me out, and this because I'm a hostess, but I'll be overbooked. I'm overbooked for the holidays, and again, I mentioned being a product of divorce, having to spend time with two families that do not talk to each other, like loathe each other. So I can't even, breathe the name of one into under the roof of one without, that person getting upset. So I just feel overbooked. Mm-hmm. And because I'm worried about how I'm splitting up my time, how people are, my parents specifically, interpreting that, it stresses me out.
What do you do for yourself to help, not feel so overbooked? Because you are pulling yourself in one direction and then the other.
What I've learned to do, because my family lives out of town, is I book my flight. That is my time in the area, and that's all I've got. And so if that's not enough time, we've mentioned this again in a previous episode, I was always the one flying out there. If you want to spend more time with me, you're more than welcome to hop on a plane from California and fly to Las Vegas. I would often internalize that, like I'd guilt myself, like, gosh, I don't spend enough time with my dad, but at the same time, he also doesn't necessarily make an effort to come out here to see me. So that guilt, I'm learning to kind of sift through that and make sense of it and make meaning of it, because that's just self-imposed, emotion that I'm putting on myself. When really, yeah, maybe my dad and I don't spend as much time as we'd like together, but I have to understand that that's a two-way street, that I can't carry that weight by myself.
Absolutely, it's a two-way street. He wants to have a relationship with you. He has to put in effort just as much as you do.
Absolutely. So I think absolving myself of that has really helped me, and kind of looking at it through a new lens, that it's not just about me, right? So I know that you kind of get guilted into spending time with family that has caused you pain in the past. Like, how do you prepare yourself knowing that you have to go over to your parents' house?
Well, that is a very good question. So what I do and what I have come up with is I came up with my own tips for surviving the holidays. And when I was telling my therapist about this, it all comes down to boundaries. Mm-hmm. And so everything that I do and that I'm going to recommend to our listeners to try for themselves has helped me over the years. Because here's the thing, my parents probably should have gotten divorced a long time ago. I think both of them would be happier people, but that's not my relationship. That's on them, right? So my parents are still together, even though there has been a lot of dysfunction, and there may not be physical violence, but there's still a lot of emotional. Yeah, there's a lot of emotional abuse and other things going on there. So what I've done, and the tips that I have are, number one is I limit my time. I'm very, very good about limiting my time, that I'm there, when I show up, when I leave, and just knowing this is that small window. So similar to what you're doing with your flight, right? You've only got a couple days. I'm not going to survive a couple days in that environment. So I limit my time to a couple hours, and that seems to work out really well for me. The second thing that I do that I recommend is I don't consume any alcohol, or I limit it to like a glass of wine. I want to have my full faculties in that space, and kind of what I was reflecting on the way over here, because this is the first time we've also decided to record with mimosas on a Sunday morning, because of the topics that we're covering, right? Which tells you something about how we thought that these topics might be a little bit heavy. I don't feel comfortable in that space letting loose. So I just don't. I will very rarely spend a lot of time drinking with my family. And that's even my family in Central America. I won't do it. And that's because I want to make sure that I'm in control of my faculties, that I'm not going to say something later. I don't want to fall into the same patterns that I've seen other family members fall into, which is they tell you whatever the fuck they want, and then later they're like, oh, I don't remember because they were drinking too much, or they were on some other substance, and they don't appreciate their words. So I definitely don't do that.
So, but coming back though, this is a question you had asked me earlier in the episode, which is like, so when would you have a chance to talk with them? So outside of, Christmas, Thanksgiving, maybe unfortunately a death, when would you have time to talk about these things that you are avoiding?
Well, see, that's the thing though. In our Christmas dinner, we will talk about politics. My dad can't vote. He's not a U.S. citizen. He'll still mention his opinions, and I'll be like, okay, whatever. And so we don't have a problem with that. But with like Matt's parents, we don't talk about politics because I very much get a sense that his father might have some views that are contradictory. But we'll talk about it a little bit. Like we'll get into it, and then once it starts getting a bit heavy, we kind of back off on it because I'm not going to change his mind. He's not going to change my mind, and I still love these people. So it's not a big deal. So we don't necessarily shy away from that stuff, but our topics when I'm going to my parents' house revolve around like history, art, conspiracy theories. They definitely come up. For a while there, one of the things that we would do, this is not one of my tips, but one of the things that we would do is just kind of play a game of, okay, what's going to be brought up first? Like, is it going to be aliens or is it going to be ghosts? Like, it's just other things. Or is your mom going to comment on your weight this visit or not? And so we stopped doing that, which actually leads me to my third tip that I have is I now focus on the positive. I don't go in expecting, because that's kind of what that was going in with these expectations of there's going to be some comment on my weight. There's going to be some comment, some passive aggressive comment. And instead of kind of going in prepared with armor, that's kind of what it felt like. I've let go of those things. And then that's been a pretty recent thing, I'd say, like in the last year or so. And my experience with them has been better. So, recently I did get a chance to spend some time with them for not a holiday, but for birthdays. And there was a part of me that didn't want to go. There was a bunch of different reasons that went into that. But at the end of the day, it was a nice dinner. But I didn't go in thinking about here's the passive aggressive comment that I'm going to get. Here's this other thing I'm going to see, somebody's going to get too drunk, whatever it is, just not having those things. So now I focus more on the positive aspects of, hey, this was a really fun dinner. This was a fun way of exchanging, or it's been a long time where it has not been just the three of us. So it was just my parents and myself because my siblings have moved on or don't engage with the family. They don't engage with the family. So there's those kinds of things. But yeah, those are basically my 3 tips. It's all boundaries, limiting your time. What did I say? Limiting your time, limiting your alcohol consumption or anything else that's going to take you out of your faculties, and focusing on the positive. I think those 3 things are what I definitely use and will continue to use to get through the holidays in any environment, not just families, but in any environment that I feel I need to be a little bit more prepared to be involved in.
Interesting, because I also created tips from my own learning, right? And I was like kind of highlighting what you were saying and limiting time for sure. That's actually something that I had on my list. And, one exercise that, might help listeners is like, if you think back to your previous years of being with your family, at what point is it too much time? Cut it off before that. So I know that I've spent time out with my family for over a week and I realized that's a little too long. And that's, again, nothing against my family. That's just emotionally for me, I can only stay there for about a max 4, maybe 3-4 days. And that gives me time to, spend with both sides of the family without feeling rushed, but it's just enough time for me. So yeah, again, limiting your time. And again, coming back to expectations, I think oftentimes, I would hold these expectations, but it's important to basically expect imperfection. And that people, you can't expect people to change or heal old wounds between one Christmas or one Thanksgiving to the next.
Even on that point, just not everybody's working on healing those things.
Well, they may not even know that there's a problem, right? Mm-hmm. So if they don't see that there's anything that needs to change, there's going to be no effort into making those changes, right? I also really like what you said, and again, this also made my list, is remembering what makes me happy. So what aspects of the holidays do I enjoy? I enjoy spending time with my nibblings. I enjoy baking or watching holiday movies. If you can identify things,
you would like holiday movies.
Well, I used to be a big like Lifetime girl, and they show like that really super cheesy where everybody's decorating the family tree, whatever.
Where's your pumpkin spice latte?
I don't have one. I don't even. Anyways, but if you can think back to what aspects of the holiday you enjoy, look to find opportunities to do more of those things instead of saying yes to things that you just don't want to do. Another thing that I found is reevaluating traditions. And, some traditions no longer serve us. And that could be because, people have had kids or they've divorced. So I think constantly looking at the traditions that you and your family do, like for my dad, for example, being Hispanic, we celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve.
Correct.
So, that's what we do. Now with my dad getting remarried and all this stuff, that may no longer serve he or I to keep up with that tradition. So I think it's important to look at traditions and think about dropping old ones and creating new ones that better serve you.
Which makes a lot of sense. And I'll add on that one, part of Latino culture includes opening gifts at midnight, staying up until midnight. I wake up at 5 a.m. That doesn't work for me. Even during the holidays, it just no longer works for me. And so my family's adjusted on that one. And so now we'll go over Christmas Eve, we'll have dinner, and then we'll open up presents Christmas Eve. And it's not that need of, okay, we have to be there until midnight to open up presents and we're falling asleep over each other because we get up early. And when we sleep in, it's till 7. Like
absolutely.
I like that, changing traditions.
And my last one that I had was like planning ahead. Oh yes, pour me more mimosa. Last one I had was planning ahead, and this is a game changer for me. And let me tell you why. It's because you need to do what you have to feel safe or in control in a situation. So before I started really planning ahead, I would fly into California, but I wouldn't have a car. So now if I wanted to leave a situation, I'm stuck. And I hated that. And so, if you can rent a car or get a hotel room, or perhaps even like have a friend that you trust and say, hey, I'm going to my family's for the holidays. I may need to, tap you in. I might need to call you for some advice or just to kind of, talk me out off the edge. So planning ahead is crucial. At least that's been what it's been like for me. So now if I can plan ahead, not that I have to have an escape route, but
I do.
But it's just I need to feel like if the environment that I'm in is toxic or becoming toxic to where I don't feel I'm safe. I'm not talking about physically safe, emotionally safe. And I know myself, and if I need to just leave the situation to diffuse or just to cool down, then I need to go. And yes, I have my feet, and there have been times where I've just gone for a walk, and that has helped. But again, I think planning ahead allows you to feel like you have some sort of control in like the chaos that is life.
Well, even talking about that, right? So, okay, maybe you went for a walk, but what if you were in a situation where you couldn't go walking, you couldn't actually get out? Have you done anything that has helped you in those situations?
Well, and that's one of the bullet points that I made was me time. And so it's like whatever that consists of. Maybe that consists of meditating, exercising. It's not uncommon for me when I go back to California. I mean, I like to exercise anyways. I value wellness and health, but I'll go for a run. And reading, just something to kind of just, even if it's momentarily taking myself out of that situation, whether it's getting lost in a good book or meditating, journaling, whatever, I found that really helps.
For me, I found that writing has helped. So I had a trip earlier this year with my mom to Central America, and it was a good trip overall, even though I sprained my ankle on the trip.
I remember you sent me nasty black and blue pictures.
Oh yeah, no, it was a pretty gnarly fall. But even with all that stuff, there was a point where there was an eruption of just, I don't want to necessarily call it an eruption. That's probably not the right word. There was a time where my mom let loose in a way that I didn't agree with, and she acted a fool. Let me just put it that way, okay? And I got really upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't want to engage. But here I am halfway through this trip. I can't leave.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I had a car, they wouldn't let me go anywhere because I'm in Central America and they think every single time I go, I'm going to get kidnapped or something. I'm like, first of all, I'm twice as big as everybody here. And that's not even because I'm huge. That's because they're super little. Okay. Like I show up and the police is like 5 foot and I'm 5'3". Like, you know, Mataways thinks I'm going to go over there and just like take over by saying, hi, I'm here. I'm your new ruler. But anyways, like they're small people. Okay. But I couldn't go anywhere. So they won't let me go anywhere. Even going for a walk, they insist on me having some sort of protection. Like my 5-year-old niece is going to, you know, protect me from
But there's
somebody.
a reason why.
I get it. But like the point being, I can't get away.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this circumstance, I ended up escaping to my phone, but not playing video games or anything, writing a story.
I remember this story.
We're not talking about that story right now. Dear listeners, it might be a little bit saucy. But I ended up writing a very long novel during this trip. And when I came back and I told my counselor about like, you know, everything that had happened, and she just kind of looked at me, she's like, I'm not at all surprised that that's what you did. I was like, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't you? She's like, you escaped.
Mm-hmm.
You needed to find a way to escape mentally, and you did. And you escaped by, you know, writing a book on your phone. I was like, okay, I guess I did. And that was a healthy way for me to deal with it, because it would have been very easy for me to have been like, well, fuck this, pull over to the next gas station, and I could have just bought all the alcohol. I was buying it anyways. That's another story for another day. But I could have done other things to escape. And for me, that healthier way of doing it was writing.
And I think it's good. Again, it comes also down to not even just setting boundaries or expectations, but also self-awareness and being mindful of things are getting to be a little too much for me. I'm getting a little too overwhelmed emotionally for this. And, you know, I think for me that has been key, because oftentimes I would suppress it and be like, shut up, Melissa. Like, it's the holidays, just like grit your teeth and bear it, right?
Yeah, you have to be here.
You have to be here. This is family. But why am I carrying this cross? You know, it's just, if it's uncomfortable or I don't want to be there, that's okay. You know, I think we have this idea that it's the holidays and everything has to be joyful, and why am I the one that's fucking it up because I don't want to be here? But chances are I'm not alone in this feeling.
No, you're not. And I mean, and I do think that the holidays do bring on a lot of anxiety of just, oh, I have to go spend time with these people. Maybe you don't. And if that is something that is open to you, I gotta say, not having to spend both holidays with my parents has made a huge difference for me. And I know that part of that has to do with my relationship. We just happen to split it up that way. But I can tell you, my mom hates it. And so even this year she had to mention it. She's like, well, you're not going away for Thanksgiving, are you? And I was like, yeah, we are. Like, we're going to do it. We think we can travel safely to Denver on an airplane, even with everything that's going on. We feel comfortable doing that. And I could just feel the resentment, because she was expecting, oh, well, they're not going to go anywhere, and then she'll be able to come here, because basically she has canceled Thanksgiving over the last several years since I started doing this. And like, what guilt that got put on me of just, oh, well, we don't do Thanksgiving now. Well, that's up to you. Like, my little brother was still living at home. My dad's there. You can still do Thanksgiving. Like, why do you think that because I'm not showing up, you can't make yourself the roast that you want or the turkey that you want? Like, don't put that on me. That's your choice.
Again, that comes to family roles, which we'll talk about in the next episode. But in the end, I think that you just need to, or listeners need to do what makes them feel safe, more than anything, emotionally, physically safe.
Right. And then also, when you're reflecting back, try to focus on more of those positive things. That trip that I mentioned earlier was literally the only trip that I took in 2020, because then everything else that we had planned for the year, as you all know, got canceled. Nothing else was available. And so I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity to go on that trip, that I had to see some things that I haven't had a chance to see, visiting Guatemala and spending time with family during that time period, even though there was definitely, in that moment, there were some negative things that were going on. Am I going to focus on that negative stuff? No. Like, I wrote a book. I had some fun. I got to do some amazing hiking before I sprained my ankle. And, the rest of it was just a giant road trip through the country. Like, that's what I'm going to remember and focus in on. When I go to the holidays, I'm trying to focus more on those positive items because they're there. I just need to make a little bit more effort to find them. And so do you.
Dear listeners, we want to hear from you. How do the holidays make you feel? And how does this feeling impact your body and mind? Join the discussion in our private Facebook community. We want to thank our producer and music director, Ron Johnson. This has been an Astronomicus DMR production. Thank you for listening. Remember, it's never too late and you're right on time.